They say trust is the foundation of marriage. What they don't tell you is that sometimes that foundation is built on quicksand, and you don't realize you're sinking until you're neck deep in lies. My name is Mark Sullivan, and I'm a financial advisor in Portland, Oregon. 40 years old, decent looking if you squint, and apparently naive enough to believe that when someone says, "I love you," they actually mean it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. It was a Tuesday evening in October when my world imploded. Julia, my wife of 3 years, had insisted on hosting dinner for both our families. She'd spent all day fussing around our downtown townhouse, arranging flowers and polishing wine glasses like we were expecting the president. "Mark, can you set up the dining room? I want everything perfect tonight," Julia called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that edge it got when she was stressed. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing client portfolios. "Sure, babe. Everything okay? You seem wound up." Julia appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. At 36, she still turned heads with her auburn hair and green eyes. But lately there had been something distant about her, like she was physically present but mentally somewhere else entirely. "I just want tonight to go well. It's important." "It's just family dinner, Jules, not the United Nations." She gave me a look I couldn't quite read. "Just set the table, Mark." By 7 o'clock, our townhouse was full. My parents had driven down from Seattle, looking slightly overwhelmed by Julia's elaborate spread. Her mother, Patricia, held court in the living room, dispensing opinions about everything from the wine selection to the throw pillows. Julia's sister Carmen and her husband Josh rounded out the group, along with our son Ben from my first marriage. Ben, at 14, had inherited my sarcastic streak and my ex-wife's ability to see through bullshit. He sat at the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone and making occasional observations that were far too perceptive for his age. "Dad, why does Julia look like she's about to throw up?" he whispered as I passed by with a platter of appetizers. "She's just nervous about dinner. You know how she gets." "No, Dad. This is different. She keeps looking at her phone and checking the door." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Julia practically sprinted to answer it, and my stomach dropped when I heard the voice in the foyer. "Jules! Sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder." Eric Dorsey, Julia's ex-boyfriend from college. The guy who somehow managed to insert himself into every major event in our lives despite the fact that they'd broken up over a decade ago. "Eric, I'm so glad you could make it." Julia's voice was brighter than it had been all day. I felt Ben's eyes on me as Eric strolled into the living room like he owned the place. Tall, dark-haired, with the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having to work for anything in your life. He worked in tech, made obscene amounts of money, and had opinions about everything. "Mark, good to see you, buddy." Eric's handshake was just a little too firm, his smile just a little too wide. "Thanks for letting Julia invite me. I know it's family night." "Yeah, well, the more the merrier," I managed, wondering when exactly Julia had invited him and why she hadn't mentioned it. Dinner started normally enough. My mother complimented the roast, Patricia dominated the conversation with gossip from her book club, and Eric regaled us with stories from his latest business trip to San Francisco. I found myself watching Julia, noting how she laughed a little too loudly at Eric's jokes, how she kept refilling his wine glass before anyone else's. "So Eric," my father said, cutting into his meat, "Julia tells us you're expanding your company?" "That's right, Mr. Sullivan. We're opening offices in 3 new cities this year. Julia's actually been helping me with some of the interior design concepts." This was news to me. I looked at Julia, who was suddenly very interested in her dinner plate. "That's great, honey. When did you start doing that?" "Oh, it's nothing major, just some consulting work. Eric needed a woman's perspective." "Julia's got incredible taste," Eric added, his eyes lingering on her face. "I don't know what I'd do without her input." The conversation continued, but I felt like I was watching it through glass. There were undercurrents I couldn't quite grasp, looks exchanged between Julia and Eric that lasted just a beat too long. It was during dessert that Julia dropped the bomb. She stood up, wine glass in hand, and I thought she was going to make some kind of toast. Instead, she looked directly at me and said, "Mark, there's something I need to say. Something everyone needs to understand." The table went quiet. Even Ben looked up from his phone. Eric is always going to be in my life. He's been my friend for 15 years, and that's not going to change just because I'm married. If you can't handle that, then maybe you shouldn't have married me. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. Patricia's mouth fell open. Carmen and Josh exchanged glances like they were watching a car accident in slow motion. I stared at Julia, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. I'm tired of pretending that your jealousy is my problem. Eric is my friend. He's always going to be my friend. Deal with it." The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to stay calm, to ask questions, to handle this like an adult. But the rest of me was drowning in humiliation and rage. "Okay," I said quietly. "Okay, what?" "Okay, I can't deal with it." I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Ben, get your stuff. We're leaving." "Mark, wait." Julia started, but I was already heading for the stairs. "Dad?" Ben appeared beside me as I grabbed my jacket from the bedroom. "Pack a bag, son. We're going to Grandma's house for a few days." Behind us, I could hear voices rising in the dining room, Julia's mother demanding explanations, Eric's voice trying to smooth things over. I didn't care. The woman I'd married had just publicly humiliated me in front of both our families, and I was done. 20 minutes later, Ben and I were in my car, driving through the rainy Portland streets toward my parents' hotel. "Dad, what just happened back there?" I glanced at my son in the rearview mirror. His face was pale, confused. I'd dragged him into this mess, and he deserved an explanation. "Your stepmother just told me that another man is more important to her than our marriage. That's messed up." "Yeah, buddy, it really is." My phone started buzzing with calls and texts from Julia, but I ignored them all. I had some thinking to do, and for the first time in months, my head was starting to clear. The next morning, I woke up in my parents' hotel room with the kind of clarity that only comes after your world has been turned upside down. Ben was still asleep on the pull-out couch, and my parents had tactfully gone down to breakfast, leaving me alone with my thoughts and approximately 47 missed calls from Julia. I scrolled through the voicemails while drinking hotel coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through a gym sock. "Mark, please call me back. You're being ridiculous. We need to talk about this like adults." "I don't understand why you're so upset. Eric is just a friend. You're acting like a child." "Your parents think I'm some kind of monster now. Thanks a lot. Call me." The messages got progressively more desperate as the night wore on, but not once did she apologize. Not once did she acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, publicly declaring that another man would always be a priority in her life wasn't the best way to handle things. I was on my third cup of terrible coffee when Ben shuffled over, his hair sticking up in 17 different directions. "Morning, Dad. You look like hell." "Thanks, son. That's exactly what my ego needed to hear." He poured himself some orange juice from the complimentary breakfast spread my parents had brought up. "So what's the plan? Are we going back home?" "I honestly don't know, Ben. What do you think I should do?" It was a heavy question to put on a 14-year-old, but Ben had always been mature for his age. Plus, he'd been watching this train wreck from the front row. "I think Julia's been acting weird for months, and last night was just when it all came out." "Weird how?" Ben sat down across from me, suddenly looking older than his years. "She's always on her phone. She goes out a lot more than she used to, and whenever Eric calls, she gets this look on her face." "What kind of look?" "The same look Mom used to get when she was planning to surprise you with something, except this doesn't feel like a good surprise." Out of the mouths of babes. I'd been so busy with work, so focused on providing for our family, that I'd missed what was happening right under my nose. My phone rang again. Julia's name flashed on the screen. "Answer it, Dad. You can't avoid her forever." I swiped to accept the call. "What, Julia?" "Thank God. Mark, where are you? We need to talk." "I'm exactly where you drove me to be, away from you." "That's not fair. You completely overreacted last night. Eric is just—" "Stop. Just stop." I could feel my temper rising again. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was, in front of both our families?" I was trying to be honest about our relationship, about what I need. "What you need? What about what I need? What about what our marriage needs?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Julia spoke again, her voice was different, colder. "Maybe that's the problem, Mark. Maybe you're too needy. Eric understands that I'm an independent woman with my own friendships." "Eric understands." "Right. Well, here's something for Eric to understand. I'm done." "What do you mean, done?" "I mean, I'm calling our lawyer today. I want a separation." "Mark, no. You can't be serious." "Absolutely serious. You made your choice last night, Julia. You chose Eric over our marriage. Live with it." I hung up before she could respond and immediately turned off my phone. Ben was watching me with wide eyes. You're getting divorced." "I don't know yet, buddy, but I can't live like this. Your stepmother has made it clear that I'm not her priority, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life competing with her ex-boyfriend for her attention." My parents returned from the hotel restaurant as I was getting dressed. My mother took one look at my face and immediately went into protective mode. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" "I've been better, Mom. but I think I know what I need to do. I spent the rest of the morning making phone calls, first to my lawyer, then to my office to let them know I'd be taking a few personal days. Then I did something that felt both liberating and terrifying. I called a locksmith and had the locks changed on our townhouse. If Julia wanted Eric to be a permanent fixture in her life, she could figure out her living arrangements without involving me. By noon, Ben and I were back at the house, which felt different somehow. Emptier, even though all of Julia's things were still there. I was packing some clothes when I heard her key in the front door, followed by frustrated rattling when it didn't work. Mark, open this door right now." I looked out the bedroom window and saw Julia standing on our front porch, her face red with anger. Eric was with her, his hand on her shoulder in a gesture that looked far too intimate for just friends. "Stay upstairs, Ben." I went down and opened the door but didn't invite them in. "What the hell is this, Mark? Why did you change the locks?" "Because this is my house too, and I don't want you bringing your boyfriend here anymore." "He's not my boyfriend. How many times do I have to tell you that?" "Then why is he here, Julia? Why is he comforting you about our marriage problems?" Eric stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Look, Mark, I think you're misunderstanding the situation here. I don't remember asking for your opinion, Eric. This is between me and my wife. Julia called me because she was upset. That's what friends do for each other." "Right. Friends." I looked back and forth between them, noting how they stood just a little too close, how Eric's hand was still on Julia's shoulder. "Tell me something, Eric. If Julia were your wife, would you be okay with her having dinner with an ex-boyfriend twice a week?" "That's different." "How is it different?" "Because I trust Julia." "And I don't?" Julia stepped between us before Eric could answer. "This is ridiculous. You're both acting like children. Mark, I want to come inside so we can talk about this rationally." "No." "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no, you can't come inside, not while he's with you. You made your choice last night, Julia. You told everyone at that table that Eric is more important to you than our marriage, so go be with Eric, figure out your priorities. But don't expect me to sit around waiting while you do it." I started to close the door, but Julia grabbed it. "Mark, please, I love you. I don't want our marriage to end over this." For a moment, looking into her green eyes, I almost wavered. Almost let her in. But then I saw Eric behind her, checking his phone like this was all just an inconvenience to him, and my resolve hardened. "If you love me, Julia, then prove it. Choose, him or me. But you can't have both." "That's not fair. You can't make me give up my friendships." "I'm not asking you to give up your friendships. I'm asking you to give up the one that's destroying our marriage." Julia stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the war playing out on her face. Part of me hoped she'd choose us, choose our marriage. But a bigger part of me already knew what her answer would be. "I can't do that, Mark. I won't let you control who I'm friends with." "Then I guess we don't have anything else to talk about." I closed the door and locked it, listening to Julia pound on it for a few minutes before giving up. Through the window, I watched her and Eric walk back to his BMW, their heads close together as they talked. Ben appeared beside me, his face grim. "She chose him, didn't she?" "Yeah, buddy, she did." "I'm sorry, Dad." "Me too, son. Me too." The next few days passed in a blur of lawyer meetings, awkward conversations with mutual friends, and the strange sensation of living in a house that no longer felt like home. Julia had been calling and texting constantly, alternating between anger and tearful pleas for reconciliation, but she hadn't once said she'd stop seeing Eric. It was my best friend Paul who finally opened my eyes to what was really going on. Paul Morrison and I had been friends since college. He worked in IT for a local tech company and had the kind of analytical mind that could spot patterns others missed. He'd never particularly liked Julia, though he'd been diplomatic about it for the sake of our friendship. "Mark, I need to show you something," he said, appearing at my office on Friday afternoon with his laptop bag and a grim expression. "If this is about Julia's social media, I don't want to see it." "It's not about her social media, it's about her phone records." I looked up from the client file I'd been pretending to review. "Her phone records? How did you get Julia's phone records?" "I didn't, but remember when you asked me to help you set up that family plan last year? To save money on your cell bills?" I did remember. Paul had helped us switch carriers and get a better rate by putting all our phones on one account. "The account is in your name, Mark. Legally, you have access to the usage records for all the phones on the plan." "Paul, I don't want to spy on my wife. She's not acting like your wife anymore, and I think you need to see this." He opened his laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet that made my stomach drop. Columns of numbers showing call logs, text message counts, and data usage for the past 6 months. "Look at this pattern," Paul said, pointing to Julia's line. Starting about 4 months ago, she's been texting one number constantly, sometimes 50, 60 messages a day, and look at the call logs. I scanned the data, feeling sick. The number Paul was highlighting appeared over and over again at all hours of the day and night, calls that lasted for hours, text conversations that went on until 2 or 3 in the morning. Do you know whose number this is? I already knew, but I called it anyway. Eric's voicemail greeting confirmed what I'd suspected. 4 months, Paul. They've been talking constantly for 4 months. It gets worse. Look at the location data. Paul pulled up another screen showing GPS pings from Julia's phone. Over the past few months, there were regular stops at locations I didn't recognize. Hotels, restaurants, an apartment complex across town. She told me she was working late at the boutique, I said, staring at the evidence of my wife's deception. Mark, I'm sorry, but this isn't just an old friendship. This is an affair. The word hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. An affair. My wife was having an affair with her ex-boyfriend, and I'd been too trusting, too stupid to see it. How long do you think it's been going on? Based on this data? At least 4 months? Maybe longer. I sat back in my chair, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. 4 months. All those late nights at work, all those girls' nights out with Carmen, all those times she'd been distant and distracted. She'd been with Eric. What are you going to do? Paul asked quietly. I don't know. Confront her, I guess. With what? Phone records that you technically shouldn't have accessed? He had a point. Even though the account was in my name, using the records to prove Julia's affair felt like a violation of privacy that could backfire in divorce proceedings. There has to be another way. Paul closed his laptop and looked at me seriously. Mark, you're my best friend, and I hate seeing you go through this. But you need to be smart about how you handle this. Julia's already made you look like the jealous, controlling husband in front of your families. If you come at her with accusations based on phone records, she'll just flip the script and make you look like the bad guy again. So what do you suggest? Document everything. Start paying attention to her patterns, and maybe it's time to let some other people see what's really going on. That weekend, I got my chance. Julia had texted to say she wanted to pick up some clothes and personal items from the house. She asked if she could come by Saturday afternoon, and I agreed, with one condition. Eric couldn't come with her. She arrived at 2 o'clock with Carmen and her mother, Patricia, in tow, clearly intending to use them as emotional support and witnesses to my unreasonable behavior. Mark, you look terrible, Patricia said as I let them in. This whole situation is just ridiculous. You two love each other. You can work this out. I hope so, Patricia. I really do. Julia was already upstairs, packing a suitcase with enough clothes for an extended stay away from home. Carmen hovered nearby, shooting me accusatory looks. You know, Mark, Julia's really hurt by how you've been acting, Carmen said. She's staying with me right now, crying herself to sleep every night. I'm sorry to hear that. Where does she go during the day? What do you mean? Well, if she's so upset, I assume she's taking time off work to deal with this. Or is she still going to the boutique? Carmen hesitated, and I could see her trying to figure out how much I knew. She's been working, trying to stay busy. Right. Working. At the boutique? Another pause. Among other places. I nodded like this made perfect sense. She mentioned she's been doing some consulting work for Eric's company, interior design stuff. The look that flashed across Carmen's face told me everything I needed to know. She was in on it. Julia's sister knew about the affair and had been helping to cover for her. I think you should talk to Julia about her work arrangements, Carmen said carefully. Oh, I intend to. Julia came back downstairs with her suitcase, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. I think I have everything I need for now. Julia, before you go, can we talk? Privately? Patricia and Carmen exchanged glances, but moved toward the kitchen, giving us space in the living room. What is it, Mark? I want to understand what's happening here. Help me understand why Eric is so important to you. Julia sat down on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped in her lap. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with 4 years ago. Eric and I have history, Mark. We understand each other in ways that it's hard to explain. Try. He knew me before I was married, before I had all these responsibilities and expectations. When I'm with him, I feel like myself again. And when you're with me? When I'm with you, I feel like I'm playing a role. The perfect wife, the stepmother, the responsible adult. It's exhausting. Her honesty was like a knife to the chest, but at least it was honest. So what you're saying is that our entire marriage has been you pretending to be someone you're not? That's not what I meant. It's what you said, Julia. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. I don't know how to be married, Mark. I don't know how to be the person you need me to be. I never asked you to be anyone other than yourself. Yes, you did. Maybe not in words, but in 1,000 little ways. You wanted me to be like your first wife, domestic, maternal, content to build my whole life around you and Ben. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, my goals, what I wanted out of life? Everything is always about your work, your son, your needs. I wanted to argue with her, but there was enough truth in what she was saying to make me pause. Had I been so focused on creating the perfect family that I'd forgotten to pay attention to the woman I'd married? Julia, if you were unhappy, why didn't you talk to me about it? Because you wouldn't have understood. You would have tried to fix it, to manage it, like you manage everything else in your life. So instead, you decided to have an affair with Eric. The words hung in the air between us. Julia's face went white. I'm not having an affair. Really? Because the evidence suggests otherwise. What evidence? I pulled out my phone and showed her the call log Paul had helped me compile. Not the detailed records, but a simple list of the times Eric had called her in just the past week. Monday, 11:47 p.m., 43 minutes. Tuesday, 6:23 a.m., 22 minutes. Wednesday, 2:15 p.m., 1 hour and 18 minutes. Should I go on? Julia stared at the phone screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. We're friends, Mark. Friends talk. Friends don't talk for hours every day. Lovers do. You're wrong. Am I? Then prove it. Show me your text messages with Eric. Show me what you two have been talking about for hours every day. I don't have to prove anything to you. Actually, you do. If you want to save our marriage, you absolutely do. Julia stood up, her face flushed with anger and something that looked like panic. I'm not going to let you interrogate me like I'm some kind of criminal. Eric is my friend, and I'm not going to apologize for that. Then I guess we're done here. She grabbed her suitcase and headed for the door, Patricia and Carmen trailing behind her like confused ducklings. This isn't over, Mark, Patricia said as they reached the porch. Julia loves you. You're just too stubborn to see it. If she loves me, she has a funny way of showing it. I watched them drive away, feeling oddly calm. For the first time since this nightmare started, I had confirmation of what I'd suspected. Julia was having an affair, her family was helping her cover it up, and I was done being the fool who pretended not to notice. It was time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. The next phase of my education in betrayal came courtesy of Julia's best friend Lana, who apparently had the discretion of a reality TV star and the loyalty of a politician. I was having lunch at Riverside Grill the following Tuesday when I overheard a conversation at the table behind me that made me freeze. I still can't believe Julia had the nerve to say that to Mark in front of everyone, a woman was saying. I mean, I know she's been seeing Eric again, but to just throw it in her husband's face like that? Well, she's been wanting out of that marriage for months, came the reply, and I recognized Lana's voice. She told me she only married Mark for security, but Eric's always been the love of her life. So why didn't she just divorce Mark before starting up with Eric again? Because Eric wasn't ready to commit. He wanted to make sure his business was stable first, but now that his company's going public, he can finally offer Julia the life she really wants. I sat frozen in my chair, my sandwich turning to cardboard in my mouth. Julia had married me for security while waiting for Eric to be ready for her. Our entire relationship had been a lie. I feel bad for Mark, the first woman said. He seems like a nice guy. He is, but he's boring. Julia needs excitement, adventure. Mark's idea of a wild night is watching Netflix with his kid. Still, the way she's handling this is pretty cold. She's protecting herself. If Mark finds out about the hotel room Eric's been paying for, or about the business they're planning to start together, he could take her for everything in the divorce. Hotel room, business plans. I pulled out my phone and started recording, hoping to catch more details. What kind of business? A high-end interior design firm. Eric's putting up the initial investment, and Julia's going to be the creative director. They've been working on it for months. So that's why she's been disappearing so much lately. That and the fact that they can barely keep their hands off each other. I swear, when I saw them at the Marriott last week, they were acting like teenagers. I'd heard enough. I paid my check and left the restaurant, my hands shaking with rage. Julia hadn't just been having an affair, she'd been planning her exit strategy for months. The marriage, the family we'd built, Ben's relationship with her, all of it had been a convenience while she waited for Eric to be ready to take her back. That evening, I called Paul and told him what I'd learned. Jesus, Mark, I'm sorry, that's brutal. I need to confront them, both of them. Are you sure that's a good idea? You're pretty angry right now. I'm furious, but I'm also done being the idiot who doesn't know what's going on in his own marriage. What are you going to do? I'm going to give them a chance to tell me the truth, and when they don't, I'm going to show them exactly what I think of liars. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. On Thursday evening, Ben was at a friend's house for a sleepover, and I was working late in my home office when I heard a car pull into our driveway. Through the window, I saw Eric's BMW, with both him and Julia inside. They sat in the car for several minutes, talking intently. I watched Julia gesture animatedly while Eric nodded and occasionally reached over to touch her hand. Finally, they got out and walked to the front door. Julia used her key. Apparently she'd had a copy made, and they entered the house together. "Mark, are you here?" Julia called. I came downstairs to find them standing in the living room, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Julia, Eric, this is a surprise." "We need to talk," Julia said. "The three of us." "I agree. Have a seat." They sat on the couch, close enough that their knees were touching. I took the chair across from them, studying their faces. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Julia and Eric exchanged a look before she spoke. "Mark, I think it's time we were honest about the situation." "I'd love that. Please, be honest." "Eric and I, we have feelings for each other. We always have." "Okay, go on." "We never meant for it to happen, but over the past few months, we've realized that we can't ignore what's between us anymore." I nodded like this was all perfectly reasonable. "And what exactly is between you?" Another look between them. "We're in love," Eric said. "We always have been. The timing was just never right before." "But it's right now?" "Yes," Julia said quietly. "Mark, I care about you, I really do. But what Eric and I have, it's different. It's deeper." "How long has this been going on?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, how long have you two been sleeping together?" Julia's face flushed red. "Mark, that's not—" "It's a simple question, Julia. How long?" Eric put his hand on Julia's knee, and I wanted to break his fingers. "We've been seeing each other for about 4 months, he said. 4 months. So you've been having an affair for 4 months, and you're just telling me now?" "It's not an affair," Julia protested. "An affair is sneaking around behind someone's back. We're being honest with you." "You're being honest now, after 4 months of lying to me." "We wanted to be sure about our feelings before we said anything." I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. "Right. You wanted to be sure. Tell me, Julia, were you sure when you married me 3 years ago?" "What?" "Were you in love with me when we got married, or were you just passing the time until Eric was ready for you?" The silence that followed was deafening. Julia's face went white, and Eric shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "Answer the question, Julia." "Mark, that's not fair." "Answer it." She looked down at her hands, and I knew. "You married me as a placeholder," I said. "A safe option while you waited for him to get his act together." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Explain it to me." Eric cleared his throat. "Mark, I know this is difficult." "Shut up, Eric. I'm not talking to you yet." He looked startled. Apparently no one had ever told Eric Dorsey to shut up before. "Julia, I'm waiting. I cared about you when we got married. I thought I could learn to love you the way you loved me. But you couldn't. I tried." "Not very hard, apparently." Julia started crying, which might have affected me a week ago. Now it just made me angrier. "And you," I turned to Eric, "what's your excuse? Why couldn't you commit to Julia 3 years ago, but you can now?" "My business wasn't stable. I couldn't offer her the security she needed." "So you let her marry me for security while you got your finances in order. How noble." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Eric? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you two used me as a convenience while you figured out your lives." Neither of them had an answer for that. "Here's what I think happened," I continued. "Julia wanted to get married, but you weren't ready. So she found someone who was me, a decent guy with a stable job who would take care of her while she waited for you to grow up. And you were happy to let that happen because it took the pressure off you." "Mark, please," Julia whispered. "But then your business took off, didn't it, Eric? Suddenly you had money and success and you were ready to play house. So you started pursuing Julia again. And she was more than happy to cheat on the husband she never really wanted in the first place." "That's not true," Eric said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? Then explain the hotel room you've been paying for. Explain the business you're planning to start together. Explain why you've been talking for hours every day for months." Both of them stared at me in shock. "You've been spying on us?" Julia asked. "I've been paying attention, something I should have done a long time ago." I stood up, feeling calmer than I had in days. Here's what's going to happen. Julia, you're going to pack your things and get out of my house. You can go live with Eric or your sister or in that hotel room you two have been using. I don't care. But you're not staying here. Mark, wait. We can work this out. No, we can't. You made your choice months ago. Now you get to live with it. What about Ben? What about him? You've been lying to him for months, too. At least now he'll understand why his stepmother was never really invested in being part of our family. Julia was crying harder now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, just a cold satisfaction that the truth was finally out in the open. Eric, I want you to know that I hold you personally responsible for destroying my marriage and hurting my son. If I see you anywhere near my house or my family again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. Eric stood up, trying to look tough. Are you threatening me? I'm making you a promise. Stay away from my family. Julia's part of your family. Not anymore. I walked to the front door and opened it. Get out, both of you. Julia looked like she wanted to say something else, but Eric took her hand and led her toward the door. This isn't over, Mark, she said as they reached the porch. Yes, it is. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce papers. I closed the door and locked it, then went to the window to watch them leave. They stood by Eric's car for several minutes, talking intensely. At one point, Julia looked back at the house, and I thought I saw regret on her face. But then Eric put his arm around her and led her to the passenger side of the BMW. As they drove away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Relief. The marriage was over, but at least I finally knew the truth. 2 weeks later, I was a divorced man. Julia had agreed to a quick, uncontested divorce in exchange for a minimal settlement, probably because she was eager to start her new life with Eric and didn't want a prolonged legal battle that might expose more of her lies. Ben had taken the news better than I'd expected. I kind of saw it coming, Dad. Julia was never really happy here. I'm sorry you had to go through this, buddy. It's okay. At least now we know where we stand. But I wasn't okay. Every day I drove past Julia's boutique and saw Eric's BMW parked outside. Every time I went to the grocery store or the bank, I ran into people who looked at me with pity or curiosity. The whole city seemed to know that Mark Sullivan's wife had left him for her ex-boyfriend. It was Paul who finally snapped me out of my self-pity spiral. Mark, you need to stop wallowing and start living again. I'm not wallowing. You're absolutely wallowing. When's the last time you left the house for something other than work or Ben's school events? He had a point. I'd been hibernating for 2 weeks, avoiding social situations and turning down invitations from friends. What do you suggest? Come out with me Friday night. There's a charity auction at the Riverside Hotel. Good cause, open bar, and you need to remind this town that you're not some pathetic victim. I don't know, Paul. Julia's going to be there, with Eric. That got my attention. How do you know? Because Eric's company is one of the major sponsors. They'll be at the VIP table, playing the happy couple for all the local business leaders. The thought of Julia and Eric making their public debut as a couple while I sat at home feeling sorry for myself was more than I could stand. Fine, I'll go. Friday night, I put on my best suit and met Paul at the Riverside Hotel. The ballroom was packed with Portland's business and social elite, all dressed to the nines and bidding on everything from vacation packages to artwork. I spotted Julia and Eric immediately. They were at a prominent table near the front, surrounded by other tech executives and their wives. Julia looked stunning in a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon. Eric was playing the successful businessman, gesturing expansively as he told some story that had the whole table laughing. They look happy, Paul observed. They look smug. Same thing, in this crowd. We found seats at a table in the back and ordered drinks. I was trying to focus on the auction items when I overheard a conversation at the table next to us. Did you see Julia Sullivan's ring? A woman was saying. Eric must have spent a fortune. I looked across the room and saw that Julia was indeed wearing a massive diamond on her left hand. They were engaged. When did that happen? Her companion asked. Last week, apparently. Julia's been showing it off to everyone. She says they're planning a Christmas wedding. A Christmas wedding. 4 months after our divorce was finalized, Julia was marrying the man she'd been cheating on me with. Good for her, Paul said quietly. She's moved on. Maybe it's time you did too. But I wasn't thinking about moving on. I was thinking about the fact that Eric and Julia had been planning their future together while she was still married to me. They'd made a fool of me in front of the entire city, and now they were celebrating their victory at a charity auction like nothing had happened. That's when I got an idea. Paul, does your company do the AV setup for these events? Sometimes. Why? Who's running the slideshow for the auction tonight? Paul looked at me suspiciously. Mark, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time Julia and Eric learned that actions have consequences. It took some convincing, but Paul eventually agreed to help me. During the dinner break, while everyone was mingling and drinking, he created a distraction that allowed me to access the laptop controlling the auction slideshow. I'd come prepared. Over the past 2 weeks, I'd compiled a comprehensive collection of evidence documenting Julia and Eric's affair. Screenshots of their social media posts from locations they'd visited together while she was still married to me. Photos I'd found on Julia's iPad showing them at romantic dinners and weekend getaways. Even some of the text messages I'd managed to recover from our shared cloud account. I created a new slideshow titled The Real Love Story and embedded it into the auction presentation. When the auctioneer returned to the podium and clicked to the next item, a romantic weekend getaway package, my slideshow began instead. The first image was a photo of Julia and Eric kissing in the lobby of the Marriott, time-stamped 3 months before our divorce. The room went silent as people realized what they were seeing. The next slide showed a text exchange between Julia and Eric discussing how to handle the Mark situation while they planned their weekend in wine country. Then came a screenshot of Eric's credit card statement showing payments for the hotel room where they'd been meeting, along with charges for expensive dinners and gifts, all while Julia was still married to me. The final slide was a photo of Julia and Eric at a business meeting, shaking hands with investors for their new interior design company. The date stamp showed it was taken 2 weeks before Julia had told me she wanted a divorce. By the time the slideshow ended, you could have heard a pin drop in the ballroom. Every eye in the room was fixed on Julia and Eric's table, where they sat frozen in horror. Julia's face was white as a sheet. Eric looked like he was going to be sick. The other people at their table were staring at them with a mixture of shock and disgust. Well, the auctioneer said into his microphone, clearly flustered, that was unexpected. Let's move on to our next item, shall we? But nobody was paying attention to the auction anymore. The room was buzzing with whispered conversations as people processed what they'd just seen. Julia and Eric had been exposed as cheaters and liars in front of Portland's entire business community. I watched as Eric grabbed Julia's hand and tried to lead her toward the exit, but it was too late. The damage was done. Everyone in that room now knew the truth about their relationship. As they hurried past my table, Julia caught my eye. The look she gave me was pure hatred, but I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Feel better? Paul asked. Much better. The next morning, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts from people who'd been at the auction. Some were congratulatory, others were critical, but all of them were talking about what had happened. Ben found me in the kitchen, scrolling through the messages. Dad, everyone at school is talking about what you did last night. Are you embarrassed? He thought about it for a moment. No. Julia and Eric deserved it. They treated you like garbage, and now everyone knows it. I probably should have handled it more maturely. Maybe, but sometimes people need to face consequences for their actions. Smart kid. Over the next few days, the fallout from the auction continued to spread. Eric's business partners were reportedly furious about the public embarrassment. Julia's boutique was struggling as customers stayed away, apparently uncomfortable supporting someone who'd been exposed as a cheater. The local newspaper even ran a story about the charity auction scandal, though they were careful not to name names. A week later, Paul called with news. You're not going to believe this. Eric and Julia broke up. What? Carmen told my girlfriend that Julia moved out of Eric's condo yesterday. Apparently the stress of the public humiliation was too much for their relationship. I felt a moment of satisfaction, followed immediately by something that might have been sympathy. Julia had destroyed our marriage for Eric, and now that relationship was over too. Where is she now? Back with her sister, from what I hear. And get this. Eric's company is transferring him to their Seattle office. He's leaving town. So Eric was running away, leaving Julia to deal with the mess they'd created together. Somehow that didn't surprise me. 2 days later, Julia called me for the first time since the auction. Mark, we need to talk. Do we? Please, just give me 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown. She looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual polished outfits. You destroyed my life, she said without preamble. I exposed the truth. There's a difference. You humiliated me in front of the entire city. You humiliated yourself, Julia. I just made sure everyone could see it. She stared at her coffee cup, her hands shaking slightly. Eric left me. I heard. He said he couldn't handle the pressure, that it was too much drama for him. So the man you destroyed our marriage for abandoned you the moment things got difficult. That must be disappointing. Don't be cruel, Mark. Cruel? You cheated on me for months, lied to my face, used me as a placeholder while you waited for another man, and you think I'm being cruel? I never meant for it to happen this way. How did you mean for it to happen, Julia? Were you planning to keep lying to me indefinitely? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I'm sorry, she said finally. I'm sorry for all of it. I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know. Why? Why do you need me to know? Because I realized something after Eric left. I threw away a good man for someone who was never going to love me the way you did. And now you want me back? She looked up at me hopefully. Is that possible? I studied her face, looking for any trace of the woman I'd fallen in love with. She was still beautiful, still the same person who'd charmed me 4 years ago. But I felt nothing. No love, no anger, no desire for revenge, just emptiness. No, Julia, it's not possible. Mark, please. I know I made mistakes, but you didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose to lie to me. You chose to cheat on me. You chose Eric over our marriage. And now you have to live with the consequences of those choices. So this is it? You're never going to forgive me? I thought about it for a moment. I forgive you, Julia. I forgive you because holding on to anger is exhausting, and I'm tired of being angry. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm willing to forget what you did or give you another chance to do it again. She started crying, and this time I did feel something. Not love, but a kind of distant compassion for someone who'd made terrible choices and was finally facing the consequences. What am I supposed to do now? I don't know. Figure out who you are when you're not lying to someone. Learn to be alone. Maybe get some therapy to understand why you thought it was okay to treat people the way you treated me. I stood up to leave, then turned back. Julia, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but you're not going to find it with me. As I walked away, I heard her crying harder, but I didn't look back. That chapter of my life was closed, and I was ready to start writing a new one. 6 months later, Ben and I had settled into our new normal. The house felt like home again, filled with laughter and the comfortable chaos of a father and teenage son figuring out life together. I'd started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and casual dinners with women who were honest about what they wanted. Julia had moved to California to start over, according to Carmen. Eric was still in Seattle, apparently engaged to someone new. I wished them both well, in the abstract way you wish well for people you used to know. The charity auction incident had become local legend, the kind of story people told at dinner parties about the night someone's messy personal life became public entertainment. I'd gained a reputation as someone you didn't want to cross, which wasn't entirely undeserved, but mostly I was just relieved to be living an honest life again. No more wondering if my wife was lying to me. No more competing with another man for my spouse's attention. No more pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Ben and I were having dinner on a Saturday night when he brought up the subject I'd been avoiding. Dad, do you ever regret what you did at the auction? I considered the question seriously. Sometimes I wonder if I could have handled it differently, more privately maybe. But do you regret it? No. Julia and Eric made their choices, and they deserved to face the consequences. I just made sure those consequences were public. Good, Ben said, because what they did to you was messed up, and everyone should know it. Thanks, buddy. Besides, it was kind of epic. I mean, who thinks to hijack a charity auction slideshow for revenge? That's like something out of a movie. I laughed. I'm glad you're entertained by your father's descent into petty vindictiveness. It wasn't petty. It was justice. Maybe he was right. Julia and Eric had thought they could lie and cheat and manipulate their way to happiness without any consequences. They'd underestimated the quiet guy they'd decided to betray. In the end, they got exactly what they deserved. Each other, until that fell apart too. And I got something better. My self-respect back, and the knowledge that I'd never again settle for being someone's second choice.